How's it going, my Comic Chat Army? We're here today with Andrea Lorenzo Molinari, the editor-director of Scout, right?
Editorial director of Scout, yes.
All right. And also the writer of The Shepherd.
Along with my son, Roberto, yes. We're co-writers, co-creators.
Oh, nice. How is it working with family in the comic industry?
I think for us, it works really well. I mean, we're actually not the only father-son duo at Scout Comics. Lee and Drew Ferguson, who do Sam and His Talking Gun. I actually edit for them for that book. But we're the two pairs of father-son creators there at Scout. So,
Nice.
but I tell you, well, I've enjoyed working with my son.
All right. So let's go back a little bit. How did you get started with Caliber?
Okay, so I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest thing. The whole book of The Shepherd actually started with a nightmare that I had about my son. I wrote an essay actually at the beginning of the collected trade that actually talks about it. I dreamed that my son Roberto, who's now my co-writer, had a drug overdose, and that he had died from that drug overdose in the nightmare. And the weird part about the nightmare, there's really two things that were weird about it. One was it wasn't just like that moment, but it was all the things that happened after that. So attending the funeral, the aftermath of all that, it was this long insertion into a reality, an alternate reality. And I woke up, I was very upset. I mean, heart beating out of my chest. My wife was, next to me, obviously in bed, and she's like, what's going on with you? And I said, I don't think you want to know. And she said, well, now I kind of do. And so I told her, and she was very upset. It took me a couple days actually to get up enough nerve to talk to my son about it. And when I did talk to him about it, he was very excited by the idea, which I was like, what? But he really thought that it was a great story, and he kind of from the very beginning felt that we should do something with it. I was just so horrified that the last thing I was thinking about was writing a story based on that nightmare. And but he just wouldn't leave it alone. He just kind of pestered me, is the best way to describe it. So we eventually sat down. It would have been June of 2011. We sat down together and got the story out and did it inside a month. We were able to write it up. And then I thought, we were done with it and, kind of get it out, be done with it, move on. But he just wouldn't have none of it. And so, he was determined that it was going to be a graphic novel. So we ended up getting an art team and putting the book together. And then afterwards, he was just convinced that we were going to find somebody to publish it. But I was the one who was sending out all the submissions packages. And I can tell you it was a nightmare because we sent out, for most people who have not done this, you need to understand that most of the big publishers are not interested in receiving submissions from you. So like, for example, Marvel and DC, they're like, don't call us, we'll call you kind of thing. And even, a lot of the bigger publishers underneath them, Dark Horse, Image, these are not easy publishers to submit to. The competition is so fierce that, your chances of them getting on their radar is very, very small. So I had sent out The Shepherd to probably in the ballpark of 40 different publishers, all different sizes, everything from Image to, to really small publishers that are not even in business anymore. And ended up, as it turned out, that when I did get feedback, the feedback that I got was that our lettering was terrible. And which now I know from being in the industry that the single most common problem with a submission is that the lettering is done in an amateurish way. Ironically, lettering is like one of the cheapest parts of making a comic book, but everybody thinks they can save money by doing it themselves. And you can't. It's like you might as well put it in crayon, and say, we we were too cheap to hire an actual letterer, and so here it is. But you probably won't be able to tell that we're writing it in crayon. But anybody who's been in the business can see right away if it's been done by a professional or it's a wannabe. And so I ended up getting it relettered, and I had an editor work with me a little bit to tighten up the script. And we ended up resubmitting it, ironically, to Caliber, because Caliber was one of the books that I had sent it to, or one of the publishers I'd sent the book to. And they weren't interested. When I originally sent it, this would have been it would have been June of 14 that I ended up sending it to them. So time has gone by. I mean, this is not a project that, lasted, a year. It took time to do this. And anyway, they weren't interested in it. In about October, November of 14, we ended up getting the editing done and the relettering process that was done. And then I resent it to a number of different publishers in December of 14, Caliber being one of them. Not even really sure why, but I sent it to Caliber, and 2 days later I heard back from Gary Reed, who was the publisher at the time, and he said, "Do you have any more of this?" Because I just sent him the first chapter of 5. And I said, "Yeah, it's all done," and I sent it all to him. And then 2 days later he sent me a contract. And as you can imagine, we were over the moon. We were really thrilled. Because Caliber was the publisher for The Crow, and most people who are interested in independent or small press comics are very well aware of The Crow. And The Crow actually takes place in Michigan, which is where I'm from, originally in Michigan, and Caliber is a Michigan-based publisher. So this was like checking all the boxes for me. It was like coming back home to Michigan publisher, connection with The Crow, all that stuff. And so that was just a huge thrill, and we ended up getting the book published in May of 15. And so now we have our publisher, the book is out there, and my son and I had really fallen in love with the process of making comics at that point. And we were determined to, continue on, because we really felt that we had something. And I still feel very much so that we have something with The Shepherd, because it takes place in the afterlife. Anybody who's ever lived in any culture that's ever existed is fair game. You could meet anybody in the afterlife. So it just opens up huge vistas for storytelling. And so we ended up starting another series. Of course, we were very stupid, having not learned anything. The first story, The Shepherd, is like 119 pages long. And the second story we ended up writing was, I think it's like 180 some pages, which, by the way, I do not recommend. I do not recommend beginning your comics career by writing a 180-page graphic novel. That's just pure lunacy. And we only did it because we were too stupid to know better. It's a long, long process to do a project that big. And you have to have incredible patience, and you have to be very lucky to pick an artist that you can afford, who has the talent to execute the book the way you'd like to see it done, and also has the willingness to stick on the project for something that's going to be long term. But that's kind of where we were, at that point. That's about 5 years ago. And so we ended up spending the next 5 years after 2015. We did a 5-year contract with Caliber. And we really learned a lot, in terms of working on the books ourselves. I started, when I got in with Caliber, I talked with Gary Reed and told him that I had a background in journalism, undergrad degree in journalism, and my PhD is in literature. It happens to be religious, early Christian literature. But I had a lot of background from a literary point of view. And I said, look, I can do editing for you or look over your submissions. And he, I think he kind of was like, oh, sure, no problem, but didn't take me seriously. So about, this is like, I'm trying to think now, this is, I want to say it's like 16. This is like the summer of 2016. And, I reminded him that I'd said I'd be happy to look at submissions and give my opinions on the different books. And he, I think, was a little annoyed, and he ended up sending me this Dropbox of like 30 some submissions that he had received from Caliber. And I think it was his way of trying to keep me quiet, like to show me that this is a lot more work than I had ever anticipated. But the funny part about it is I'd worked as a professor for years. So getting 30 submissions was a routine. Hell, I get that from one class at the end of every semester, So it's nothing that I couldn't handle. I ended up turning around, editing all those, reviewing them, giving a written review, an opinion on each one of them. And I had it back to him like within 3 or 4 days. And at that point, it was like, oh, you're serious. You're not playing. And from that point on, I started working, with Caliber more intensely. And of course, I don't know how much you know about Gary Reed. Gary was a major player. Caliber was, one of the best known small presses in the 90s. And in fact, the publisher of Aftershock, Joe Pruitt, worked for Caliber Comics. His brother, Jim Pruitt, is involved with Scout and has been involved with Scout. He's got titles, Mindbender, and other titles with Scout. So, and that doesn't even count all the different artists that got their start and writers got their start at Caliber. I'll just name a few that come to mind. David Mack, Brian Michael Bendis, Ed Brubaker, Guy Davis. I mean, there's a list of creators that have come through, or got their start with Caliber. So, and Gary was involved in that in the 1990s. So he ended up passing away in October of 16 very suddenly. In fact, I remember he had actually gone to a small convention in Monroe, Michigan, and posted, I feel like it was Sunday evening, he posted, thanking them for a great time and everything. And the next thing we heard, like, he was gone within a few hours after that post. He had a massive heart attack and passed away. And at that point, I contacted his partner, Eric Reichert, and I said, I was working with Gary on this, and I don't want Caliber to die. I don't want to die with him. I want to do anything I can and everything I can to help the press. So Eric took me on, and from that point on, really from the fall of 16, I started working much more intently, not only doing submissions work, but going out and, bringing people into Caliber in terms of recruiting titles to come to Caliber, finding, going to the artist alleys at the various conventions and finding the unpublished creators that had some very good books that just didn't have a publisher, bringing them to Caliber, and then helping to edit those books and prepare those books for publication. And that's really how I kind of got my start. That's kind of the story of how I got my start in the industry, so to speak, as both as a creator myself and also as an editor. So.
Oh, all right. And how do people letter books? Do they do it digitally now, or is it?
Yeah, I think that's all done digitally now. I mean, there might be some people that do it hand lettering, and it would be more considered, I would think, more of a throwback or quaint way of doing it now. I don't know why you would do it any other way than digitally now, because it allows you to correct mistakes so much faster, and just to work so much more effectively, changing fonts and, all that stuff. So I can't imagine doing it any other way.
All right. And are you still on good terms with Caliber?
Yes.
When you come to Scout? Okay.
Yeah. No, it was, for me, one of the reasons why I came to Scout is, obviously I'm based here in Florida, in West Palm Beach, and Scout is in Fort Myers. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the conventions I was going to here in Florida and in the Southeast were also attended by Scout creators, in particular James Hake. And I got a chance to meet him. And of course, I knew Jim Pruitt because of our connection, with Caliber. I knew of his involvement. And so I was talking with him about, Jim Pruitt and James Hake. at these conventions about what their plans were for Scout, and the more I heard them talk, the more I really liked their vision, their approach. And they asked me to help them out a couple times with a couple of freelance editing projects, and I really enjoyed that. And just over time, the more we talked, the more of these conventions I saw what they were doing with the company. And they invited me on this Zoom call once as as an editor. I was, just freelance. And I was on the Zoom call, and there were like 20 people on the Zoom call. 20 people. And they're all contributing and working towards building Scout. And I was blown away by that, because Caliber, by comparison, is very small. It was basically Eric and myself that were doing the work at Caliber. And I looked at that, and I remember coming off that Zoom call and just thinking to myself, no matter what we do at Caliber, we'll never beat that. We'll never beat that, because two people, no matter how hard they work, are not going to outwork 20 people. And one of the things that I liked about what Scout was doing is that they know how to leverage people. They bring people in, they recognize talent, and they put that talent to work. And I think that's a smart way to go. When you're small, you've got to do that. You've got to get people involved. You've got to trust people and bring people in. And I think Caliber was in a lot of ways kind of played very close to the vest. And the more I would worked with Caliber, the more I was watching what was happening at these conventions and seeing other publishers, the more I was convinced that if Caliber was going to grow, it was going to have to get its own people leveraged. Getting the people that are involved already or committed to Caliber, getting those people, whatever talents and gifts and abilities that they have, put them to work for the press. And like I said, what I had seen with Scout was that they were masters at it. Scout in a lot of ways is, if you look at who owns the company, it's all creators. It's literally a smaller version of Image, in the sense of all of them have titles with Scout, whether it's James Hake or Jim Pruitt or Charlie Stickney or David Byrne. And the list goes on, Don Handfield, they all have titles with the company. And they're deeply involved, and they're committed both for their own title, but also for the larger picture. And I think that's what makes Scout so successful. The other thing that I think, quite frankly, and I'll probably embarrass him if he hears this, but James Hake has got a great mind for business. He really does. I've said it to him to his face, so there's nothing I'm saying that I haven't already said to him. But he really thinks in terms of multiple streams of income about getting the product out in different ways, promoting the books in different ways. And I just think that kind of creative, outside the box thinking has really brought Scout to where it is, Mm-hmm. And I'm proud to be part of it. I really am. I'm excited to be part of Scout. I'm watching this stuff grow just in the last inside the last year, because I've only been with it. I signed my contract with them in July of 20, so we're coming up on 1 year, of being officially with Scout as a creator, and just the changes that have happened in that, and during a pandemic, no less. I mean, James is growing the company during the friggin' pandemic. I mean, that's stupid, ridiculous. You have companies that are basically laying people off and putting pencils down, and we never put pencils down. We never stopped creating at Scout, and that's really, I give that credit, largely to James, not exclusively to him, but, I think he's got a great vision for the company. And it makes him easy to follow.
All right. Are you going to re-release the Shepherd through Scout?
Yes. The volume that you actually have behind you is, of course, the Caliber version of Shepherd 1.
Yep.
And the Shepherd Volume 1 has now been released through Scout. So, and in fact, we're getting ready to start the process of releasing the second volume, which is called The Path of Souls. And that's going to be, the first issue of that is coming out in August of this year, and then the trade will be out in November.
All right. Did you kickstart the book, or did y'all fund it yourself before you got
Yeah,
with Caliber?
we did a Kickstarter. It was a small one, and and I'll be honest with you, what I learned about Kickstarter, and this is everybody's different, of course. I'm not saying this is what it has to be for other people, but I realized that Kickstarter was a hell of a lot of work, and that I wasn't interested in doing all that work. I would much rather do the work myself and pay for it out of my own pocket than do a Kickstarter, because it's nerve-wracking. It's a ton of work to do a good Kickstarter. You call in every chip that you have in terms of people who owe you a favor, and then it's not guaranteed that you're going to be successful. So for me, I guess I like to have things that are a little bit more predictable. So I'm interested. I'll do the extra work, take on a secondary job or whatever it takes, and then just pay for it myself. And that's really, Berto and I talked about it. And that's kind of where we're at. I've had people, try to talk me into doing it, but having done a couple of Kickstarters, I just don't need that kind of thing in my life.
Yeah.
I just don't. And clearly it works for others. I mean, it's Charlie Stickney at Scout is very successful with Kickstarters. David Byrne is very successful with Kickstarters. We have a number of our creators that have done very well with it. So it is very much a viable path to helping to fund books. It's just not the path that I prefer to take. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrea, for coming to talk with us. Is
Sure.
there anything you want to say to the people before we go?
Well, I definitely appreciate people's support of the Shepherd, but also, I think more importantly, the support that we've gotten for Scout. I think that the best is yet to come. I'm very excited to see where we're headed as a company. And I can tell you, as somebody who is, editorial director, wait till you get a load of some of the books that are coming out in the next year. Because we have some really good stuff coming. Yeah, I feel pretty confident that people are going to enjoy what's coming.
All right. Well, thank you.